God has also automated a process which we help them for supplier invoices, through which they have processed more than $3 billion worth of invoices till date. And they were able to optimize 17 to 18 humans to do more value-added jobs. So I think I'm very proud of that achievement at St. John of God. It's already public, that information. So I would now like to invite Lisa from Monadelphis and Andy Rosson from UiPath to share their journey. ESG and responsible automation goes hand in hand. And I think ESG is now more mature in terms of how it can be judged, how it can be implemented. And there's a huge demand from the mining companies to implement ESG, and automation is the right way to implement it. I will invite Andrew Rosson to speak about ESG and having a fire chat with Lisa from Monadelphis. Over to you, Andrew.
Thank you, everyone. I really like the fireside, stage side chat. So we're going to emulate the same thing. So I'll ask Lisa to come up in probably about 10 minutes, and we'll do the same thing. I'm going to have to come up with some different questions now to make sure that we don't double up. But I did like the banter that was going on. So I think it's time for audience participation. So you can all sigh collective now. ESG. Can anyone tell me what the acronym ESG stands for? While I figure out the left and right on this thing. Anybody? It's an acronym. We love acronyms. We're IT. Why is ESG there's a cartoon I saw the other day. It said there's one thing in the universe that is faster than the speed of light, and that is the speed at which people become experts in ESG. So I am not an expert in ESG, and so what I wanted to do was take you through ESG today and just sort of break it down a little bit into the component pieces, and also just present to you some considerations from an automation perspective. What does it mean for us in the automation space? What are the opportunities for us, and what are the challenges? And I'll come back to that last one in a minute. So let's firstly understand this seminar is all about automation for good. So we understand that we're talking about financial performance, but we're also talking, as you can see, sustainable and ethical, the non-performance metrics, about how we gather data to be able to support those. So from an E perspective, we're talking about the energy we consume and the waste that we produce. And so carbon emissions, climate change, really fundamental key pieces for the E part. For the people who deal in the S, and we're really talking about social, and we see a lot of topical, from a mining perspective, a lot of conversation recently around sexual harassment, around workplace and workforce gender and interaction between genders. And so there's a lot in that space really from an S perspective that really elevates it front of mind. And finally, G, the fact that we have some sort of governance, and governance is not new, but governance around, firstly, these practices and controls and procedures that perhaps then support those first two pieces. So what we're talking about from an area of focus, and I really don't have a lot of time, so I'm only going to pull out just a couple, that we see a lot, green financing. So if you run a coal mine today and you're looking for finance, there's a good chance that banks may apply a criteria to you that could be unfavourable for you obtaining finance. Number two, ESG reporting is the most common consideration and topic that we have chats with our customers about. And so I put it to you, is ESG reporting the biggest topic that you've seen from your executive recently? And if it is, what has been the main challenge that you've found when you need to speak to them about ESG? If you work for Deloitte, they would say that the biggest challenge at the moment is data. There's a lot of sentiment and a lot of acknowledgement around the fact that executives want to report on their E and their S, and of course apply good governance to do so. But the biggest problem, and Deloitte highlight this, is data for these items just isn't available, or if it is available, people aren't sure where it is. You can see there from an availability perspective, the greatest challenge for data, 32% of availability, but then followed really closely by quality. And a good example I want to give you is my daughter worked for Alcoa, and so from a scientist perspective, she had a drone sitting in a box behind her desk, which they purchased so that they could fly it above some of the componentry in the Kwinana refinery to gather some metrics on some of the emissions. No one knew how to fly that drone, so no one was actually providing these emissions data that was then a critical component for the ESG reporting that executive had mandated. So you can see that there's a bit of a knock-on effect when it comes to being able to access data. So identifying it and accessing it are two different things. So we see a lot of concern there that the quality of that data, it really isn't there. So, push the button. So what can you do perhaps to streamline the conversations you're having with exec or with management around how you would actually commence or start to obtain data for your journey? And so the identify piece, I think, is a really good place, obviously, to start. And I do notice down here we're talking about identifying the different sources of this data. Where is it located through our organisation? For example, siloed data, we all recognise that's a reality within our organisation. It's scattered across different technologies as well, spreadsheets, people's minds, systems. And so some examples of being able to consider alternate sources, and I see energy and gas utility bills is a consideration. I know Raj from Water Corp, you guys might like the nice new water bill. It's really nice. And so I'm sure Raj will talk about that in a little bit. But being able to strip data from your utility bills to be able to funnel that into systems for reporting sounds absolutely sensible. And so then that pushes through into the collection. So being able to get that accuracy component dealt with, right? So we can collect it, but let's make sure that we sanitise it. Let's make sure that we aggregate it in a sensible way so that it becomes reliable. That non-repudiation piece has to be essential if we're reporting this upwards into whatever arena it is that our data is going to be delivered towards. So multiple site managers is a conversation we're having at the moment with an organisation with about 150 sites, and I've got a slide on that in a minute, where different actions and different approaches are taken in each mine. So collection, where'd that go? So as we step through the preparation and the process part is obviously where we start to step in from an automation perspective. So creation of workflows, being able to add value to either the extraction or the aggregation of that data is absolutely essential. And so there's some really good examples. I think Daniel was talking about cost savings from an AP perspective. There's absolutely cost savings from a manual process execution as well. How can we reduce the ability for people to have to go and gather data from different places, aggregate it together and put it into some sort of a reporting system? There's absolutely cost savings to be made in that. And again, back to the topic of this seminar, sentiment is a real key thing. Do you really want your people sitting there filtering data every month just so it can be reported? It's not a value-added task, and it certainly isn't a task perhaps lots of people want to do. So the final thing is store and report. And just conscious of time, I'm not going to go into too much depth here, but I think we seem to have an absence of ESG solution as far as a cohesive solution. We have storage, and we have vendors providing all sorts of technologies for us, but we have disparate systems, and that's the reality. And so how we can centralise the collection of that data for storage reporting seems to be the ultimate goal from the ESG perspective. So what I wanted to do is just give you a bit of a real-world example. I spoke briefly about that organisation that had about 160 sites across the globe. They were trying to aggregate reporting across a diverse portfolio, primarily as a primary producer. They were actually refining product into saleable material. And you can see some of the items that they're trying to report on. How do you report on your carbon emissions when your carbon dioxide for your vehicles or your machinery isn't even being captured? Very difficult to do. So there's a whole maturity process that can be applied to this to say, here's my baseline, this is where the data exists, this is the processes that go to support it, this is the aggregation and the final remediation as far as its storage goes. And is there a workflow capability? Is there opportunity for automation to present itself, it seems to be a really good opportunity for our automation professionals in the room when we're having conversations with our exec on this topic. So I just wanted to leave it there as a bit of a primer for the conversation that Lisa's going to have, and I'd invite Lisa to come up to the stage. Lisa works for Monadelphous. She's on stage today representing herself, not necessarily Monadelphous, so the conversation really is going to be her experiences. And it is a fire. We do have a fire, so there you go. It is a fireside chat. So, is this one on?